Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host, Omar Khalid. Today is the 1st of August. A new month begins, but we've got a lot to discuss with you. Our first segment today concerns Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif's visit to Balochistan in the whole context of rains that have caused havoc not only in Balochistan but also in other provinces of Pakistan. But most of all, it has been Balochistan that has been affected the most, with the number of casualties, with the number of houses and infrastructure that has been affected by it. And of course, as you can see in the parallel images as well, the number of people who have been affected, the crops that have been affected by all of it as well. We are going to discuss the measures that the government has taken and what needs to be done as far as climate change, and how these rains are also more or less a derivative of the climate change that Pakistan is one of the worst affectees of. This is going to be our first segment. Our second story, ladies and gentlemen, concerns India and the Human Rights Watch that has said that Narendra Modi led BJP fascist government in India encourages the persecution of Muslims and other minorities by the hardline Hindu nationalists since it came into power in 2014. This was said by the South Asia director at the Human Rights Watch. We will discuss that in detail because, of course, we've been highlighting that in various other programs in the past as well, and with more and more people confirming what we have been saying about what Narendra Modi is doing to the different minorities in his country and also in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. This is just another of the proofs of what we have been highlighting since so long. Then we'll be talking about the food crisis in the context of Ukraine-Russia war, as we well know some good news coming out of it. The first ship to set sail from Ukraine with grain exports since the beginning of the Russian invasion. It is due to leave Monday under a guaranteed safe passage agreement. This was said by the Turkish Defense Ministry, and he said that more is going to follow. So that means that the food crisis that had engulfed a lot of the countries might come to some kind of a conclusion soon in a positive sense. Let's hope more and more such food items come out of the region so that more and more countries could get the necessary required amount of grains. And finally, we'll be talking about the Daughters of the Mountains, Fazana and Najiba, differently able international athletes who hail from Zadkhun in Chiprusan in Gilgit-Baltistan, and how their efforts have been recognized by the government of the Gilgit-Baltistan, and they've been awarded different prizes. And of course, we just want to highlight what the differently able people in Pakistan have been doing. We've got Olympians who've taken medals in the Special Olympics as well. Last year in Tokyo, we had one such example. We have so many other differently able persons who are working in so many different fields, even in the business community. It just goes on to say that where there is a will, there is always a way. Let's come to our first segment, ladies and gentlemen, and that concerns climate change, how Pakistan has been affected, and how, especially as far as all the provinces are concerned, Balochistan has been the worst affected. Our premier is there. He's been talking to the different people in different areas of Balochistan and has also dispersed checks amongst the flood affectees. More in the following report.
The monsoon season has been exceptionally challenging for Pakistan as climate change has worsened frequency and intensity of rains. Torrential rains and flash floods continue to play havoc in different parts of the country, especially in Balochistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif reached Quetta on a day-long visit to oversee relief operations in the flood-affected areas of Balochistan. The National Disaster Management Authority Chairman, Lieutenant General Akhtar Nawaz, briefed the Prime Minister regarding the relief and rescue activities while on board the flight to Quetta. The death toll in the flood-affected districts of Balochistan has risen to 136, while 70 persons have been injured. According to a report released by the Provincial Disaster Management Authority, a total of 13,535 houses collapsed or got partially damaged due to the ongoing heavy rains and flood. Meanwhile, large-scale relief and rehabilitation operations are underway in all affected districts of the province. The ongoing monsoon disaster offers an urgent reminder that in an era of global warming, extreme weather events are increasingly the norm and not the exception across the world. Pakistan has long ranked among the most climate vulnerable countries in the world according to the Global Climate Risk Index, which tracks the devastating human and economic toll of extreme weather events.
We've been joined by Sarah Hayat. She's a climate change expert. Thank you very much, Sarah Hayat, to have joined us. Sarah, when you look at what is happening in Pakistan, of course, we know that Pakistan is one of the worst affectees as far as the countries are concerned due to climate change. But these rains this year are unprecedented. Do you attribute it to climate change alone?
Hi, thanks for having me. Well, like you yourself said, so Pakistan experiences rainfall and flooding at some level almost annually. And you can't attribute it entirely to climate change, although climate change is a major contributor. So global warming is now causing natural disasters. It's triggering or it's exacerbating natural disasters and extreme weather events globally. And Pakistan, unfortunately, has been ranking within the top 10 most affected, like you yourself said. However, we need to mention glacial lake outbursts here also. Very high temperatures in our northern areas are causing glaciers to melt very fast, which are causing flash floods, and that is a major contributor to the flooding in this country as well. Deforestation is a major reason. We can't eliminate that. Apart from that, poor urban planning, really, that has to be factored in. Overpopulation, a lack of awareness. All these factors come together and are causing the kind of damage. So flooding will occur. Because of climate change, we can expect floods to occur globally, not just in Pakistan. But we can.
We've seen flooding. We've seen flooding in countries such as Germany as well, in cities. I think you must have seen the visuals as well. That was very strange for a country like Germany to be flooded. One of the cities in Germany to be flooded. This said, do you feel that the floods, that the climate change affected problems that concern Pakistan are going to get worse over the years? And if so, what needs to be done by the administration?
Well, climate change is expected to, global warming is expected to keep increasing unless we take very serious mitigative measures, which means controlling greenhouse gas emissions. And we also engage in a lot of adaptation measures. For something like flooding at this point in Pakistan, we need very serious adaptation measures, and we need flood control risks. We need to take flood control adaptation measures. Pakistan has flood policies in place. I think Pakistan has an idea of what to do also. For example, in Karachi, with the kind of urban flooding we experience almost annually, this time the government did try to clear drains a little earlier so that it would help mitigate the damage. But what we do need is massive flood risk assessment. We need aerial surveys. We need to figure out where flooding impacts who. We need to make sure there's no floodplain encroachment. That is very important. We need to raise awareness amongst people. We need to do it in their vernacular. We need to, if they're not literate, we need to show them graphics on how to deal with flood crises. We can expect flooding, but flooding doesn't need to lead to fatalities anymore. Like Pakistan can prepare for that.
I understand. How important, in your point of view, Sara, is the role of the NDMA and the PDMA?
Crucial. They're crucial. We are expecting natural disasters, and we need proper, sound authorities to deal with it. What's even more important, though, is that they work in harmony with each other. There shouldn't be a provincial and a federal mandate. There should be, because flood crisis is a national crisis. So the NDMA and PDMAs must work together and collaborate, and there should be transparency in what they're doing.
All right, Sara, when it comes to over flooding, and of course the rivers get inundated, then we have to open spillways as far as dams are concerned. Similarly, dam spillway was opened today as well, and there are other concerned issues with that. How should one deal with that in the future? Because if these rains continue to create havoc or play havoc with our lives in the future as well, we need to be prepared in advance for any eventuality that could happen. What should be done, in your point of view, for those infrastructures that are maybe nearer to glaciers or those dams that are not dams, but those banks that are nearer to the glaciers, or such infrastructure that is near areas that could easily be flooded in case something happens in the future?
Right, so we do. I get your point. I think we need reservoirs. We definitely need them. A proper assessment before making dams, so that there's equitable water allocation across the country is essential. Dams will help mitigate flood risk. We also need to make sure that infrastructure like bridges and roads that have currently been damaged, even this year, they should be reinforced. They can be. We need to make sure that we're constructing outside of flood or flood-prone zones. Overall, what we really need to do is we need to make sure that people aren't living in areas that are that are at a risk of flood. And we know this because our Met departments are strong. We know exactly what areas are going to get impacted by flooding every year.
But Sarah, this said, it's easier said than done when you say that you have to maybe change the location of certain housings or certain people who are living in area since generations, and you tell them, this area, it can be affected very severely by the flood in the coming years. It has been affected this year as well. A lot of people don't want to change. How to convince them, and what measures need to be taken by the provincial and the federal government in that respect?
Wonderful question. Yes, absolutely. I think a lot of people are wary of leaving, even though because they have been generationally resident there. But climate change is actually forcing people to move, and I've seen it. I've worked on it. I've seen it with my own eyes in Punjab and in Sindh especially. What needs to be done is that the government really needs to start convincing them. So some people are moving out of necessity, dearth of water, dearth of food, agricultural output is bleak. Some are actually do move, like on the Sindh coastal and the Balochistan coastal belt, people have moved due to natural disasters. What the government can do in assisting them is make migration easier, especially for women and children, because the migratory process or climate change induced migration is a tedious process. So the government can help make that easier. The government can help give create jobs. They can help create, potential. They can earmark potential areas
that can make people change their locations and maybe go to safer areas as far as the flood prone areas are concerned. When it comes to crops, a lot of crops have been destroyed due to these floods as well. What kind of measures could be taken? Because a lot of people depend on it. A lot of families depend on it. We depend on it through the produce that comes out of through these crops.
Right. So with flooding, what you can do is crops are going to get damaged, especially if you're growing them again in in high flood risk areas. Like even this year, rice crops have gotten destroyed, and so have palm tree crops. But what you can do, you can make
dates have been destroyed. There are huge crops of dates have been destroyed. Grapes, those have been destroyed as well.
A very lucrative crop this year. What you can again do is you can tell people via an aerial survey that look, these areas are prone to flood risk, so don't sow here. What you can do is you can give alternative land to people. You can earmark areas where crops can be sown. You can also give early warnings that look, this month we are expecting flooding, so do not sow in these areas in between June to August or June to July, because like I said, we do have an idea. We know obviously we can't predict the entire intensity of what's coming, but we do have an idea what kind of rainfall to expect. Like for example, we are expecting heavy rainfall in August in Balochistan again. So these are things that you can sort of preempt and you can convey to people.
But you talk about Balochistan, that has been the worst affected area as far as Pakistan is concerned, with the numbers that have reached staggering, figures as far as the people affected, people who've died. 130 plus people have perished due to these floods, and thousands of houses have been destroyed. So people have lost the places where they used to live. Crops have been destroyed, and so on and so forth. And our Prime Minister has been there, is there as we speak, and has been comforting the people and has been giving them the checks so as to alleviate some kind of some of their suffering that they are going through. But generally speaking, for areas such as Balochistan or maybe areas such as Gilgit-Baltistan, where GLOF is a huge issue, what in your point of view should the public-private partnership need to do? Because I don't think this is just a government, the job of the government to go forward with. I think the private sector needs to come in as well.
Well, the private sector, I think, can only help to a certain degree, really, when a natural disaster is concerned. But yes, of course, the private sector can pool resources in. They can help with flood rehabilitation.
Or with development of infrastructure, Sarah, if nothing else, for those who've been affected by the earthquake, or not the earthquake, the flood, sorry.
Like I said, the private sector can help with flood rehabilitation efforts. They can help with infrastructure development. They can help with schools. They can help with hospitals. But overall, the onus will fall on the government, because this is a national disaster. Whether it's happening in Balochistan or Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, it's a national disaster for Pakistan.
That is so true. Coming to Gilgit-Baltistan and glaciers that you talked about, can one predict if a glacier is going to melt?
We know glaciers are melting. We can predict to some level that certain months will be hotter, so there'll be accelerated snow melting, which can lead to flash floods. Like right now, we know that the temperatures are higher in the northern areas, which is why there's accelerated snow melting and ergo the flash floods. The videos are circulating all over national media for those also. The rate of glacial melt can be predicted scientifically, but I'm not sure how accurately.
All right, Sara, how important becomes the role of the government? You talked about the principal role of the government when it comes to floods or helping the people who are affected by, eventualities such as floods, and also creating an atmosphere that such events in the future do not lead to catastrophic events such as what we are witnessing right now. What, in your point of view, if you were, for example, part of the government, the current government is doing whatever it can. We've seen the Prime Minister being quite passionately and aggressively pursuing this. But if there was a 3 or 4 point agenda in your point of view, what should that be?
Well, like I said, I think the government is cognizant of it already, to be honest. They know that they need to conduct aerial assessment of regions. They need to make sure there's no encroachment on floodplains. They need to move people. They need to convince people. They need to raise awareness. You need early warning systems. The importance of those really cannot be stressed enough. You need to make sure that you are ready when the flood arrives. So there are preemptive measures, and then there are the present day measures. Like when the Prime Minister is there right now, I'm sure like people watching the news know that, and it's excellent that he's there because this is a humanitarian crisis. But people are telling him that they aren't receiving food, and so something like this, are your PDMAs and your NDMAs, and your NDMA really needs to make sure that they are held accountable for it, something the Prime Minister has vowed to do. Then you need to make sure that your medicines are ready. You need to make sure that your doctors and your paramedics are ready. Right now, the Prime Minister himself has identified something very excellent. He said that, at relief camps, you need to make sure that there are proper records of people who are being treated, something that was absent. He also said that you need veterinary doctors because livestock is a source of... Of
course, it's being affected as much as the humans are. That is so
Yes,
true, Sara.
exactly.
Do you feel that waste management, that is something that is not being tackled properly in the big cities in Pakistan, or air pollution, it also contributes somehow, somewhere, directly or indirectly, to the current state of affairs that we are witnessing in Balochistan and other parts of Pakistan, as far as flooding or other issues related to climate change are concerned?
Well, air pollution related to flooding, I mean, air pollution climate change does cause air pollution because greenhouse gas emissions do cause air pollution. So they turn the air hazardous, and that has effects on your health. However, wastewater or solid waste management has direct consequences for flooding, especially for urban flooding like Karachi. Where you see that not clearing drains is one of the principal reasons, or having old sewerage infrastructure, which cannot accommodate the kind of waste that a metropolis like Karachi produces, is one of the leading causes for urban flooding.
All right, Sara, when the nallas, the rivers are inundated, you talked about creating more avenues for water storage. What about the water that drains out of it? Do you feel some kind of mechanism could also be evolved so that that water gets stored as well in the future?
Yes, you need reservoirs to store water. You also need to make sure that the Indus Delta, which is actually the draining mechanism for our country, is in good shape. At this point, it really isn't. You've cleared off the trees there. So trees is something that we must stress upon. It does help with flooding. If you're deforesting at a very high rate, then trees cannot control. Then they cannot help mitigate flooding. So what we need is we need to make sure that the Indus Delta is preserved and is in good health, really, so to speak, so that we can drain excess water into the Arabian Sea.
All right. What are the preemptive measures in your point of view that need to be taken now? I mean, at this moment, as you said, it is also predicted that the month of August is going to be detrimental for people in Balochistan because of the heavy rains, and I'm sure other areas will be heavily inundated as well. We've seen Islamabad also with unprecedented rains this very week. But what do you feel needs to be done as a preemptive measure?
Well, at this point, now that the Met Department has knows that it's going to be August is going to be tough again, what they need to do is in areas that are already flood impacted, they need to make sure that the relief camps are properly stocked. They need to make sure there's food, there's water, there are medicines, there are doctors, veterinary doctors available at hand, willing to help people. That there's a transparent mechanism. For big cities right now, I don't know if there is a warning for flooding in big cities, even in Karachi at this point. But right, drains need to be cleared. People need to be intimated. People across, I cannot stress this enough. I keep coming back to this. You need to tell people in advance. Early warning systems are mandatory. In a place like Karachi, you can tell them through cellular networks and through televisions and through radios, but in far-flung areas of Balochistan, you need to make sure this
Exactly.
ground.
This is the point in far-flung areas. Sometimes these warning signs reach quite late in the day, and maybe it might be too late for them. So some kind of alternate mechanism needs to be evolved for that.
But it's not tough. Your PDMA has localized presence. It has it can and it should have district-wise presence. Small NGOs, it can interact with those. It can coordinate with those to make sure that there is grassroots level sort of trickling down of information. So if in a far-flung area where people do not have access to cellular networks or to cell phones or to electricity or the internet, you can have a small PDMA office. You can have a local government. You can have an NGO that you can coordinate with, which can start intimating people in time. These are mechanisms that easy to sort of put in place if you get behind them.
I think that's very important. I think it's important to understand that and prepare oneself for that as well, for any eventuality that could happen in August or even next year for that matter, because we are seeing currently what is happening in Balochistan, especially in Balochistan, because other provinces of Pakistan have also been affected, but there are measures that are there, but for Balochistan more needs to be done in my point of view. What about the the Prime Minister was extremely angry at the unavailability of food and water at the tent city for Balochistan's flood victims. Do you also feel, because you understand climate change much better than I do, that there needs to be some kind of rationing for future possibilities or eventualities as well in areas such as Balochistan when it comes to food and water?
Well, if you're talking in context of natural disasters or extreme weather events, absolutely. You need to be prepared at all points. So you do need rationing, you do need storage. If you're talking in terms of agriculture, because climate change is going to and is affecting agricultural produce for Pakistan, yes, we need long-term plans now. We need to figure out how to combat food insecurity that is arising for us. All of a sudden it's too hot and our crops don't yield enough, and we are experiencing food insecurity. So we need long-term measures, we need silos to store food, and we definitely need a long-term plan to we need proper seeds. There are seeds that are heat tolerant or that are water that can grow in saline water. So we need to adapt to climate change in these areas, definitely.
Thank you very much, Sarah Hayat, climate change expert, talking to us about the climate change affected rains, unprecedented rains that have caused havoc in areas, especially in Balochistan. We've seen the flooding. We've also seen the measures that the government is taking. The Prime Minister, who is currently in Balochistan as we speak, has met many of the victims in different localities of Balochistan and has also distributed checks amongst some of the victims. Of course, it is a collaborative effort of the government, of the private institutes and of the people themselves to collaborate together in order to come out of such eventualities. It's not just the responsibility of one institution, in my point of view. Let's come to our second story, and that concerns Human Rights Watch and, of course, what it has talked about as far as the Modi-led BJP government in India is concerned, that encourages the persecution of Muslims and other minorities. It has come to power in 2014. Nothing new, but more evidence coming through the Human Rights Watch. More in the following report.
BJP government's majoritarian politics is exacerbating communal fault lines in India, which might trigger instability in the entire region. An unapologetic Hindu nationalist, Narendra Modi, rose to national power by tapping on a mountain of hatred and Islamophobic sentiments. Sensing the gravity of situation, Human Rights Watch says the Modi-led fascist BJP government in India is encouraging persecution of Muslims and other minorities by hardline Hindu nationalists since coming to power in 2014. 2014. South Asia Director at Human Rights Watch, Meenakshi Ganguly, said the BJP government has not only failed to protect the Muslims and other minorities from attacks by Hindu extremists, but is providing political patronage to these extremists. A report of Human Rights Watch said the authorities in India have adopted laws and policies that systematically discriminate against the Muslims and stigmatize critics of the government. BJP government enacted a citizenship law that discriminates against Muslim refugees, linking citizenship with religion for the first time in constitutionally secular India. The democratic freedom of speech and expression is under severe threat in India, as every person exposing BJP's hate, bigotry and lies faces persecution and harassment. International community must take serious notice of persecution of minorities and the Muslims in India as the country stands at the brink of genocide.
We've been joined in the studios by Mohammad Zubair Khan, who's an analyst. Thank you very much, Mohammad Zubair Khan Sahab, to have joined us here. Zubair Khan Sahab, when it comes to India and the way it is dealing with the minorities, whether it be Muslims, Dalits, Sikhs, Christians, but especially Muslims, it is no hidden secret. Since 2014, we've seen countless number of incidents that have proven the fact that this government is here with one very strong agenda, and that is to persecute the minorities. There are different reports that have come. They have reports from the Amnesty International, from Human Rights Watch, from Genocide Watch, and so on and so forth. Even the United Nations Human Rights Council has taken out 2 reports on it. We've got the US State Department that has talked about it. Why is there more of such reports and not any kind of pressure tactic or action taken against India for this?
I think first of all, thank you very much for inviting me today.
No problem.
And I think that India has been given a free hand by the international community, particularly by the United Nations and the big powers like the United States and the European powers. They've turned a blind eye towards the atrocities that they are executing, particularly in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. And apart from that, in the entire length and breadth of the country. Now we have seen cases in Uttar Pradesh, we are seeing cases and witnessing some worst form of brutalities against Dalits, as you have just mentioned, against Muslims, particularly Muslims, Sikhs, and other minorities.
Christians as well. Even they've not been spared.
Absolutely. Particularly Muslims, I would...
particularly, of course.
Of course. And I think that some worst form of brutalities and atrocities that are being carried out by Indian government, particularly since 2014, this fascist BJP-led, Modi-led government has taken over. Since then, the atrocities have seen a surge.
Exactly. Yeah. But there's no letting, this is a surge that is continuing non-stop. And there are so many reports, and we're here talking about the report by the Human Rights Watch. And the South Asia Director, Meenakshi Ganguly, says that this government has not only failed to protect Muslims and other minorities from attacks by the extremists, the Hindu extremists, but it's also providing political patronage to these. And we've seen so many cases in the past as well, when there have been hit and runs, when there have been, you remember the case of the journalist who was stomping on the dead body of one Muslim as well. You know, there are so many cases that that countries could go to the International Court of Justice or could go to the United Nations, and it could be very strong sanctions. The FATF could put it in the blacklist for that matter, just on this and so much. But nothing is happening, and you said it gets the patronage of important countries in the West. Is there a geopolitical or geostrategic angle to all of this?
I think there is a financial angle to this, an angle of economics to this, the geopolitical angle to this also, a diplomatic angle to this also. India being in the run for permanent membership of the United Nations Security Council, India being a big country, a big market for the international community, for the international producers. And then I believe that a BJP-led government is not only vilifying the Muslims and with all the impunity, with all the patronage, as you have just said. And the fresh example is of the communal violence just held in Delhi this year in the month of February, where 53 people, particularly Muslims, getting killed and more than 200 getting injured, properties getting destroyed. So the Indian government is absolutely right in the heart of the country, right in the capital, New Delhi. So we have seen cases in West Bengal, we have seen cases in Rajasthan, we have seen cases in Maharashtra, particularly in the wake of COVID-19 restrictions also, in the wake of financial regulations, foreign funding regulations, in the wake of all those. They are cow slaughtering, we have seen cases related to that, murdering of people in the name of cow slaughtering, and then draconian laws, sedition laws being used against Muslims, being used against Dalits, being used against other minorities also.
Of course. But Zubair Khan Sahib, do you feel that there's going to be some kind of an end to this, or this is just going to continue in the same vein till some kind of a response comes from within the communities in India? But is that response coming in your point of view in the short term, long term? Will there ever be a response from within India?
From within India, well, I think that this response is coming from within India, from within the communities, as you have just mentioned, but it will only end when the international community is going to respond strongly to all these atrocities. When the United Nations is going to implement its resolutions of 1948, of 1947, the Security Council resolutions, particularly for Kashmir, the resolution of the dispute of Kashmir.
And there's not just one resolution on Kashmir, there are countless resolutions. Yes,
multiple resolutions.
The whole issue, I think, comes on the implementation or the application of resolutions or all these statements or all these reports, because it's excellent that so many organizations are talking about the barbarities that the Indian government is perpetrating. It's very good that the United Nations also takes out these reports, but do you feel these reports are enough?
I think I would term it as institutionalized barbarianism that is being carried out, and not only since 2014. I believe it has a long history since the dispute of Kashmir.
But it has heightened since 2014.
It has, yes, it has. It has certainly got intense since 2014, since the BJP government, and particularly since Prime Minister Modi has taken over, and in Uttar Pradesh, as we have seen, the Chief Minister getting into the act himself,
of course,
and targeting innocent Muslims, targeting innocent women and children, and till the international community responds to it strongly, these unabated acts of the state terrorism, I would rather term, will not come to an end.
So in your point of view, people in India that are currently witnessing this with Genocide Watch calls a banning of a genocide, this is something, do you feel that they turn a blind eye to, or they are too afraid to talk about it because they see the examples of Rana Ayub or other journalists, even one who has the same name as yours, Zubair, who has been incarcerated because he talks about the realities of what is happening in India?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the journalists, even the poets are getting arrested, even the academicians, the professors, even the peaceful protesters are being arrested, incarcerated in Tihar jail, the notorious jail of India. So I think all people from all walks of life are being persecuted, are being harassed.
You have the example of Yasin Malik Sahab.
Yasin Malik Sahab, even in this condition that he is not feeling well and he's seriously ill, and he's just being again.
He's on a hunger strike, and nobody is doing anything as far as his current state of affairs is concerned. He's been admitted to a hospital, but despite that, despite the attempts by his wife also, Mashal Hussain Malik, and others, the Kashmiri leaders as well, the Indian government doesn't seem to care, does it?
Absolutely not. Yasin Malik Sahab has just been transferred back to Tihar jail just today, despite his serious illness. So I think that not only the regional powers, but the international powers, the international community, United Nations, United States in particular, have to raise voice against these atrocities.
But the United States, the US State Department did raise some kind of a voice, let's put it that way. There was a quote-unquote statement that was made, and that was made on what was happening within India. But on the regional front, on the other fronts, if you look a little bit behind, we've got the 5th of August that is coming, the day the Articles 370 and 35A were abrogated as well. The day is going to come.
Abolished, rather.
Yes, of course. But that is also a very important day as far as the people in Kashmir is concerned. And you talked about the laws, that have been formulated against the interests of the minorities, especially the Muslims. Do you feel this is something, state of affairs that is going to continue over the years till such time, as you said, that the international powers react strongly?
It is already continuing. I have just termed it, I would just call it again an institutionalized barbarianism, institutionalized persecution, and keeping it under the cover of legislations like these sedition laws, national safety acts, and all those draconian laws under which the people are being persecuted, prosecuted under the wake of tax raids, foreign funding cases and regulations, and all those things. Even the film city, the actors are being persecuted. They are
even the whole, the way their films are being churned out now has a certain, pro-Hindu element to it.
A tinge of that,
yeah, exactly.
Absolutely, anti-Muslim rather, I would say. So anti-Muslim tinge of that, and pro-Hindu, the Hindutva ideology of RSS, because BJP actually has its basis in the RSS ideology, in the Hindutva
That
ideology.
we know, of course.
So for that matter, they are absolutely right-wing political party. And
But
till
how
they are
come
in
a right-wing political party has the support of so many within
Well,
India?
they are in big numbers. There are about 800 million Hindus living in India. It's not a small number. It's the second biggest country of the
But
world.
are all
in
of
terms
these
population.
Hindus right-wing? Are all of these Hindus not pluralistic? Haven't they been through the previous times or eras within India where there used to be a certain respect for the minorities?
Not all of them, but the section of Hindus that are in power, that are right-wing, that are fascist in their mindset, they are carrying out this persecution of Muslims, discriminatory policies, exploitation and harassment of all kinds, of all types, of all dimensions also, against all minorities, as you have already said. So I think that not all Hindus are that extremist, or for that matter, right-wing Hindus.
But they're being influenced.
They're being influenced through media, through legislation, through propaganda, through diplomacy. So there are multiple.
But you talked of media, that is extremely important. You understand how media plays a very important role in hybrid warfare as well, and that is what we are seeing as far as Indian media is concerned as well. They propagate a certain mentality, a certain mindset, and sometimes a lot of fake or falsified information.
Narrative also.
Exactly. They are building a narrative
yeah.
for the people within India, and not just abroad, but for the people within India, so that tomorrow, if God forbid anything even worse happens, they say, oh, this was all the fault of the Muslims or all the fault of the minorities. Can something be done to counter that?
And there is one example I would like to substantiate your argument, or rather by putting an example. Just this year, there was a mass congregation in New Delhi, the Tabligh-e-Ijtema, the very famous, and Indian government termed it as a Talibani congregation. They termed it as...
when it had been occurring every year very regularly.
And they said that because of that, COVID-19 spread very fast. So they are always trying to hit Muslims in all the possible ways, be it a religious, giving it a religious color, or giving it a cultural dimension, or giving it a political dimension. They are trying their best to hit Muslims. So I believe that all the minorities are getting affected, but Muslims are the biggest minority for that matter. There are about 250 million Muslims living in India.
True. In fact, it's a huge minority, in fact, more than what we have in Pakistan.
Yeah.
But this said, what is the basis on which this hatred that is propagated through the RSS ideology by the BJP government and their bhakts, where does the whole base lie in? What is the reasoning for all of that?
I believe there is some grave complexes in their mindset. I don't know from where they ooze out. Maybe some sort of inferiority complex, or maybe some sort of superiority complex, or as Freud says, that all superiority complexes come out of inferiority complexes.
That is so
maybe
true.
because of that, because they have some hidden or some sort of innate hatred towards Muslims, and not only Muslims, I believe to all the divine religions that are living, the followers
Even
of
to
which are
Dalits
living
who are Hindus, but
Dalits
this is a whole reminder of the caste system that exists within the Hindu
their own religion.
is-
Yes, in their own religion, there are 4 castes for that matter, and they are actually subjugating Dalits for the last many hundred years, many dozen years. So it's not only about Muslims. Muslims are an additional, I believe, minority, along with Dalits and Sikhs and others. Even once the Kartarpur corridor was opened, they were not happy with that.
They're still not happy with it.
They're not still happy with that. So wherever they think that the minorities get some sort of a sigh of relief or some sort of respite, they try to subjugate them again. They try to marginalize them, and that is being carried out in a very tactful and a very legal, for that matter, under the cover of the constitution. They are carrying it out in a very, I believe, discreet manner. Discreet
But
in
it's
the
not
sense,
so discreet.
Discreet, I believe, in the sense that international community does not see that. They are unable to see that.
Or they don't want to see
They
that.
want
I
to see
don't
that.
think that they are unable to see it. I think they just don't want to see.
Don't
They
want
turn
to
a
see
blind
that.
eye
Blinding-
and a deaf
blind eye,
ear
yeah,
to all
absolutely,
to all of that
yeah.
is happening within India, and especially within India illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. And talking of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, you can't say anything that could be against the interests of India. You try to post a picture, you try to post anything on the social media, and the forces come to your door, and you are forced to not only take that out, but sometimes you're also incarcerated for that. You try to say something on what is happening, and you are incarcerated for. There are so many examples of what is happening within Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. The number of Kashmiris who've been martyred, if just we look at in the month of July, there have been 6 Kashmiris who've been martyred just in the month of July, and notwithstanding all those who've been incarcerated incarcerated, or all those who are being, pushed under some kind of pressure so that they don't then tell the truth and subjugate themselves to the whims of the BJP-led government and their ideology. Will that happen in the eventuality?
I believe so, because I believe it is an organized genocide. In the wake of cordon and search operations, they're killing the youth of Kashmir. They are actually targeting the youth of Muslim families and community. So it's an organized. There are 900,000 Indian Army personnel working over there, stationed over there in such a little area, in such a small area. So I think it's an institutionalized and an organized campaign against Muslims in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and particularly after the abolishment of Article 370 of the Indian Constitution, Hindus are buying properties in Kashmir from all over the India.
And the demography that is being changed within the Kashmir region as well.
Changed, yes, absolutely. This is an organized campaign.
So, brief answer, Zubair Sahab, what is the only way out for the Muslims of India? Should they ask the West to intervene? Should they ask the United Nations to intervene? Should they ask neighboring countries to intervene?
I think neighboring countries have also to play a part in this, but the biggest part is to be played by the International Court of Justice, is to be played by the United Nations itself, who are the champions, who are the so-called champions of human rights, who are the so-called champions of human rights when it comes to China, when it comes to other countries. They are, campaigning against the atrocities being carried out in different countries. So why not to talk about India?
Of course.
So I think that the biggest, and the Muslims of India, they need to be united under one umbrella, under one organization. They need to have unity. I believe they are not united as they should have been.
All right, so more unity is needed and more attention given by the West as far as the atrocities within India is concerned that are being led by the BJP-led government. Thank you very much, Zubair Sahab, to have joined us and to have given us such ample time to talk about the different aspects and dimensions of these barbarities that are happening more aggressively since 2014.
Thank you
very much. Let's come to our last two stories very quickly. The first concerns Ukraine and a grain ship that is all set to sail. And as far as the Turkish defense minister is concerned, more is to follow. The first ship is to set from Ukraine with grain exports since the beginning of the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. This is going to leave today under a guaranteed safe passage agreement. This was said by Turkey's defense ministry. This Sierra Leone flagship Razzoni is going to set sail from Odessa port for Lebanon with its cargo of corn. And of course, we all know about the food crisis and of course the gas and the oil crisis that has come to the forefront since this crisis between Ukraine and Russia began. But this is quite a welcome development because of course both the sides, the Ukrainian and the Russians, sat down and said that we need to come out with a solution to that. I hope more such negotiations and a process begins so that other aspects of this crisis are also tackled with diplomatically rather than through war. And let's come now to our final segment, and that is Daughters of the Mountains, Fazana and Najiba, who are differently able. You can see the little visual on your parallel screens. These are international athletes that hail from Zadkhun in Chuperson. And they are, of course, they have been awarded cash prizes by the Chief Secretary of Gilgit-Baltistan, Chief Minister rather of Gilgit-Baltistan during the Baba Gundi festival. And of course, he very graciously gave them a prize of 50,000 rupees, promised them jobs as well. Under, of course, the district administration of Gilgit-Baltistan, the district administration of Hunza has commissioned a very short documentary, images of which you can see in this parallel window as well, to give these extraordinary athletes a national audience and help them get better education and sporting opportunities. As we very well know, we are so fortunate to have people who have this zeal, this zest to do whatever they want to do, and this passion can be seen in the eyes of these girls and how they have come forward and in the sporting field. And it's just not relegated to the sporting fields. The differently able people are coming up in all the different areas, whether it be IT sector, whether it be the business sector, whether it be the entrepreneurial sector. They are all coming up, and they do not take their issue of being differently able as some kind of a hindrance in whatever they want to achieve. They have the passion to achieve what they want, and where there's a will, there is always a way, as we've seen in the example of these two women. And last year also in the Tokyo Paralympics 2021, we had Haider Ali also, who brought back medals for Pakistan. So wishing all the best, wishing all the strength to our differently abled community. We have your back and we'll inshallah always have your back. With that, we come to an end to today's Newsroom. We'll see you inshallah tomorrow with new segments, stories that pertain to us, you in Pakistan. As I always end my show, kindly be careful, follow the SOPs and get yourself vaccinated as far as COVID-19 is concerned before it's way too late. Allah Hafiz.